evening, everybody. Welcome to Meyer Studio Masterworks. My name is Jason Meyer, and tonight we are going to seem to ask some obvious questions, but I think you might be a little surprised by the answer. And Miss Susan, good evening, good evening. Surviving the heat, and Miss Ellie and Shakti are here. Hello, hello, hello. So tonight we're going to talk about what is visibility and just how do you hold the light. So we're going to look at some Hovsepp Pushman. I've got some Odd Neerdrum lined up, and maybe even a Fred Cummings or two. So we've only got about half an hour and the time flies. So why don't we get into it? Before we do, I've been warning about a little bit of time now that eventually this stuff was going to be moved inside of our school. That time is fast approaching. If it's not done for our July course, it will be done for sure for our August 3-month course. So if you've been able to watch some of these and everything over the last year or even recently, and would like to continue to follow, I'd like to encourage you to check out the online school and go ahead and register for a free account, and then that way you'll be updated with all the new classes and programs that we have. All right, so let's get to the iPad where we can talk about this stuff. We can talk about holding the light. So we're going to look at this painting by Hovsepp Pushman, but we're going to narrow in on it. And I want to just simplify this down. Let's not look at this whole painting. Let's just look at this statue here and what we have going on here. Well, what visibility is, it means you can see it. And if you haven't studied this very long, well, geez, that's obvious. But in a painting, what brings visibility? Well, its value changes between the light, the shadow, and the background. You don't believe me? Okay, well, let's try it out. Again, I'm not here to ask you to believe me, but we should investigate. What if we just decided that everything should be this value? So anything with inside that is not visible because there's no change. Does that make sense? It's a little bit of an abstract thing. If it's the first time you've heard it, you're going, what? But if I fill the whole screen up with that, there's no change. Now, that doesn't mean you can't tell that that's, but why can you tell? Because there's a perimeter around it. A perimeter, there's a limit to it. So, if we think about this object being what we're looked at, how in paint did he create this? Well, do we have a background value that's in between our shadow and our light value? We do. And if some of you guys will remember from the other day, I said, don't ever, that's so heavy, that grabs you so hard. You shouldn't ever do that. But in fact, he's used that little piece to really hold you into this painting. So we've got one parenthesis here. It holds the light. You see this dark? You see that dark? Yep, it holds the light. Well, now we've got this dark, and look, we've got that dark. Yep, it holds the light. So, what would happen if we just weren't quite, that's so hard, Jason said don't ever do that. Well, I just said, unless it's for a good purpose. Does this painting just get weaker? Amazing, huh? That one little section here is holding. And look at how different that is from that. Do you see the values there? And then the bottom is okay, because if we'd have done this all the way around, well, that's going to be too much. And if we do the same amount over here that we have on this side, that's too much. So one of the things I want you to pay attention to here, because we talked about last night on Sketch Club, how we can portray a circle like that, and then if that circle's tipped up, we can suggest like that. And then we also talked about making whatever side is closer more and making that less. So in the terms of more to less, more to less, and then does it switch to a little less and more? It's actually these little patterns of more on this side and less on this side, and then reversing that for less to more over there. It's actually, that's what's going to give you the interesting compositions, the interesting shapes. But we're all so distracted by these beautiful colors, by a statue like this, right, that we just fly right by what's actually doing all the work. Miss Janny made it. Good evening, Janny. Good evening, good evening. All right, so let's continue here. This is like one of my, and sometimes we have such a hard time seeing these just because we're so blown away by it. But do you see the similar thing happening here? Why does that look so bright? Why does that look so bright? Well, we've got a dark, and then that's darker, right? Really, we've got this big dark holding that. Look at all of this, and then there's not very much at all over here, is there? And notice how often, too, those harder little parentheses, especially on the light side. He's taken it away from the edge, hasn't he? Look, that's into the center of the object. That dark there, look, it's on the inside. Right? So, again, this is kind of subtle stuff, but if you don't start playing and seeing it, it's not going to work. Here, it's this dark to there, and then here to here. See how all that light's held? Anytime you see light, you're going to see dark of some kind on each side of it. And it can change too, because look, what's light here when compared to here and here becomes a dark for that. Relativity, relativity, relativity. It's all relative. A dark and a dark holds our light. But it's also what makes the light visible. What do you mean visible? What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Well, again, if I took this, now is that color just as pretty here as it is on that vase? No. Because it was uncontained. Right? What's quote unquote visible or pops? Right? That yellow that's held by that darker stuff. Okay, so let's come to the odd near drum. Hard for tough. And that's the thing, but the reality isn't from it looking like a photo. The reality of a painting comes from it feeling alive. Feeling alive. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish that. So isn't that cool though? But yeah, it's amazing. Somebody's at the circus tonight. At the circus and still watching Masterworks. Hey, you're going to miss the show. You're going to miss the show. All right, so Miss Cindy there, always handling it no matter where she's at or what she's doing. Now what do we have? Well, we still got a light held by a dark. Is it held over here? And it's held over here too, but not as much. Not to be gross or anything, well, but what about the armpit? Isn't that where push? He's got the same thing, but how much different is that value in that shape? Well, for one reason, that wasn't his point of focus, but he had to separate this from the body. What about over here? Why do we look at this? Why does that look so real? Is it because everything behind it, it's got so much detail in it? No, part of the reason that brings this reality that makes it so real is this shoulder. Meaning that shoulder is requiring so little attention that whatever energy and focus we would have given there is instead down here. And so that's a big part of it, is controlling that focus. Then if we get into this again, ooh. But Nirdrum's a sneaky little guy. Yeah, we're holding our darks, we're holding. But is this really what we're seeing? Well, it's what gets us there. It's what gets us there. Do you see those little details? The fingernails. That's really what makes this so powerful. I mean, look guys, it's not that bright over here. But that little bit of detail and light and hard edges do it. And I mean, if you really look close, I mean, you kind of hate to point this out, but that thumb doesn't quite look natural, does it? Did you ever question that? No, it never crossed your mind. It never crossed your mind. Because he sold that so well, you did not notice that she needs to go to the hospital because there's some severely broken bones there. All right, and now he's done it again and in a different way. Why is this so much softer than that? Well, these values are brighter. These edges are harder. So let's see if that's true. Let's see if in her face those values are closer, and are those edges softer? Yeah. But is everything still being held? Yeah. You guys remember when we talked about the energy of the eye? Do you guys feel all of... Right, they're just not sitting there, but that movement is part of what makes them feel alive. Alive. Cindy the Master Juggler, I like it. And it's true. And it's true. Okay, there's Mr. Odd Nirdrum. We've covered this one more time, but since we're here, let's point it out. So in a sense, we've got three quote-unquote focal points. And look how masterfully he's handled each one. How has this one become a focal point? Well, because of the sheer size of the light. Why did that one become a focal point? Because of the quote-unquote details. Right? Value has to do with the two, but this one is mostly about the size of the light. This one is drawn mostly because of details along with the value. And then what about this? Why is that drawn? Because the value is not that bright, not compared to the other ones. It's a psychological. How do you spell psychology? Oh my God, I got myself in trouble here. Is that anywhere close? I don't know. Psychology. Whenever we see an object that might be a person, guess what? We're going to find out if we know that person. If they're friend or foe, who are, right? This is psychologically, the face, the human face, carries a tremendous amount of weight. So how beautiful is this that he was able to balance those three different aspects of focus into a single image. I know it blows my mind. I hope it blows your mind. Hope it blows your mind. In a safe way, of course. All right, let's go for a couple more. So let's look at a different close-up of a portion of an odd near drum. And why do we see that face in light? Is it held? Look how different. But yeah, it's held. That's held. That's held. That's held. That's held. All of that's held. All of that's held. Does that make sense when I say held? So all that light is literally held by the dark. Like it's swaddled. Make sense? Remember when I said you got to see it simply? This is what I'm talking about is even on something so absolutely stunning like this, after probably a few looks, I've seen this thing many times, you can begin to see how they did it and understand how they did it. Ha! Ha what? Ha what? Is he not holding the light? Very much similar to what we just saw with Odd Nirdrum. And how tricky too. Why is he able to do that? Why is he able to do that? That's pretty light down there, guys. That's pretty light. Fred, what are you up to, buddy? What's going on? Well, because there's so little contrast. But if he'd have put bigger marks in here, this value relationship between the white and the dark is going to crush that. When I say crush it, it's like listening to a little quartet, acoustic quartet. And then like Metallica coming up and setting up a concert in their giant amps next. it's going to get blown away. So if you're going to have something like this, I mean, it takes real mastery to have this much in the front. Right? And what that does is it slows you down just enough so you don't just run into there. And then of course he's got all of this slowing us down. Before we get to the show. The show. All right, how are you guys doing? Is it making sense? Are you seeing how these guys hold the light? How they make these things visible? All right, 4 minutes. What do we got? We got anything left? I had one more Hofstep Pushman, and I wanted to save this to last. Because the question is, how much does it take? Yeah, that's the entire side of that parentheses versus all of that. So we could call this easily more, and this would be easily less. More and less is exactly how art is made. Down here, what do we got? We got a few of that holding against all of that. Look how much is more. Now it's not completely open. In some places it might be, but it's not held that hard all the way up and down. Right, so we can get really structure on this side and more activity on that side. Oh, look over here. Holding the light, holding the, yep. Okay, guys, that's gonna about do it for me tonight. I hope all of you guys got some good insight off all of that. And is the same thing happening back here? How is this guy showing up? Because of this dark versus that light. But that dark is so much weaker than that dark. That light is so much weaker than that light. But it's still a repetition, an echo of what's going on there. All right. Jim McVicker. I do know Jim McVicker. Well, I know of him. I shouldn't say I know him. He's a California artist just up the coast. Haven't seen his art in quite a while. I'd have to take another look at it. Janny. You're welcome, Miss Shakti. You're welcome, Miss Susan Schaefer. Hope you guys have a good evening. And I'll be back in the morning right here on YouTube for Morning Jumpstart and mixing along on our last color study of this month. So I'll see you guys back in the morning about 8 a.m. right here. Till then, everybody rest well. Good night, everybody.